months, one exhausted soul abandoned distractions, faced painful loneliness, and discovered discipline could rebuild a completely broken life from the inside. The room was silent except for the soft buzzing sound of a phone charger near the bed. A pale blue light from the screen filled the dark apartment. Empty snack wrappers sat on the small desk beside cold coffee cups that had not been cleaned for days. Clothes were piled in the corner near the window. The curtains were half closed, letting in only a thin line of gray evening light from outside. Rain tapped softly against the glass. The person sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling endlessly through videos with tired eyes. One video showed somebody traveling through mountains. Another showed someone celebrating success in a bright office surrounded by smiling people. Another showed perfect morning routines, perfect bodies, perfect lives. The thumb kept moving. Scroll. 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 Hours passed without being noticed. The room slowly became darker as evening turned into night. A small clock beside the bed showed 11:47 p.m. The person looked at it for a second and sighed deeply. Again. Another wasted day. The body felt heavy and weak from sitting too long. The shoulders hurt. The eyes burned from staring at the screen for hours. But even with exhaustion growing stronger, the phone still stayed in the hand like it was impossible to put down. The silence inside the apartment felt uncomfortable. So the scrolling continued. Outside, rainwater rolled down the street under orange streetlights. Cars passed slowly through the wet roads below the apartment building. Somewhere far away, a dog barked once before the city became quiet again. Inside the room, nothing changed. The same messy desk. The same unfinished notebook. The same promises. A notebook lay open near the corner of the bed. On the first page, large words were written with confidence from months earlier. New life plan. Below it were goals that once felt exciting. Wake up early. Exercise daily. Learn new skills. Focus. Stay disciplined. Build a better future. But most pages after that were empty. The person stared at the notebook for a long moment before looking away. Seeing it hurt now. At first, those goals felt possible. There had been motivation once. Energy once. Hope once. But slowly, days became weeks. Weeks became months. Nothing changed. Every morning started with the same thought. Today will be different. But by afternoon, focus disappeared. The phone returned. Videos returned. Distractions returned. And every night ended with guilt. The worst part was not failing once. The worst part was repeating the same cycle so many times that failure started feeling normal. The person stood slowly and walked toward the bathroom mirror. The apartment floor creaked softly with each step. Bright white bathroom light filled the small space. The reflection looked exhausted. Dark circles under tired eyes. Messy hair. Slouched posture. A face that looked older than it should. The person stared silently for several seconds. Then looked away. It became harder and harder to recognize the person in the mirror. Not because appearance changed dramatically. But because something inside seemed missing now. Confidence. Purpose. Belief. The kind of energy people carry when they know where they are going. That feeling had disappeared quietly over time. At first, nobody noticed. Even the person did not notice. But distraction slowly stole everything. Not in one dramatic moment. Little by little. One wasted night became many. One skipped workout became months without movement. One delayed goal became forgotten dreams. The dangerous part was how comfortable it all became. The apartment turned into a hiding place from the world. Days blended together so completely that remembering what happened last week became difficult. Sometimes sunlight entered through the curtains, but the person stayed in bed anyway. Sometimes friends sent messages asking to meet, but excuses were easier. Busy today. Maybe next week. Not feeling great. Eventually, the messages became less frequent. Loneliness arrived slowly too. Not dramatic loneliness. Quiet loneliness. The kind that sits beside a person during late nights. The kind that grows during silent dinners eaten alone. The kind that appears when seeing everyone else moving forward while feeling completely stuck. One afternoon, the person sat near the window while cold wind pushed rain against the glass. A laptop remained open on the desk. Unfinished work filled the screen. Deadlines had already passed. Emails remained unanswered. The person rubbed tired eyes and leaned back in the chair. The room smelled slightly stale from staying closed too long. Outside, people walked quickly under umbrellas, heading somewhere important. Everyone seemed to have direction. Movement. Purpose. Meanwhile, inside the apartment, time felt frozen. The phone vibrated again. Another notification. Another distraction. The person picked it up automatically without thinking. Minutes disappeared instantly. Then another hour. By evening, nothing meaningful had been completed again. Frustration built heavily inside the chest. The person threw the phone onto the bed and covered the face with both hands. Why can't I just focus? The words came out quietly into the empty room. No answer came back. Only silence. That question had been repeated many times before. Every failed attempt made motivation weaker. At some point, the person stopped trusting personal promises completely. Even simple goals felt impossible now. Wake up early. Failed. Exercise. Stopped after 3 days. Read books. Could not focus longer than 5 minutes. Every small failure added more disappointment. And disappointment slowly became identity. The scariest thought arrived late at night. What if nothing ever changes? That thought stayed longer each week. Sometimes the person imagined the future. Another year inside the same apartment. Another year wasted online. Another year feeling tired, distracted, unhealthy, and emotionally lost. The image created a deep fear that could not be ignored anymore. One cold evening, electricity flickered briefly during a storm outside. The apartment became dark for a few seconds. The person sat quietly near the window holding a cup of instant coffee that had already gone cold. Rain crashed harder against the building now. Wind howled softly through the narrow streets below. The city lights looked blurry through the wet glass. For some reason, the silence that night felt different. Heavier. More honest. The person looked slowly around the apartment. The mess. The dust. The unfinished plans. The clothes on the floor. The untouched books. The tired reflection in the dark window. Everything suddenly felt like physical proof of wasted time. Not one bad day. Not one bad week. Months. Maybe years. The chest tightened painfully. The person stood and walked toward the mirror again. This time, the staring lasted longer. No music. No videos. No distractions. Just silence and reflection. The eyes looked tired, but underneath the exhaustion was something else. Fear. Real fear. Not fear of failure anymore. Fear of continuing exactly like this forever. That realization hurt deeply because it felt true. Nobody was coming to save this life. No perfect moment would arrive. No magical motivation would suddenly appear one morning. The person understood something painful in that quiet bathroom. Distractions were not simply stealing time anymore. They were stealing identity. Potential. Health. Confidence. Future. The rain outside slowed slightly. Small drops slid quietly down the glass window. Inside the apartment, the person finally picked up the notebook again. The old new life plan page stared back silently. For the first time in months, the person did not feel temporary motivation. This feeling was different. Quieter. More serious. The kind of feeling that appears when somebody becomes completely tired of disappointing themselves. The hand tightened slightly around the notebook. The room remained messy. The future remained uncertain. Nothing had changed yet. But somewhere deep inside the exhaustion, a small decision finally began forming. And for the first time in a very long time, the person understood that changing life would not require perfect motivation. It would require sacrifice, consistency, and the courage to let go of distractions completely. The next morning felt strangely quiet. Rain clouds still covered the city, but soft sunlight pushed through the curtains for the first time in days. The apartment looked exactly the same: messy desk, empty cups, clothes on the floor, yet something inside the person felt slightly different. Not motivated. Not excited. Just tired of suffering. The phone rested beside the bed, but this time it was not picked up immediately. The person sat there silently for a moment, staring at the notebook again. Then slowly, almost nervously, the room began to change. Trash was picked up first. Old cups were carried to the sink. Curtains were opened fully, letting cold morning light enter the apartment. Dust floated through the sunlight while fresh air moved gently through the room. It was not a dramatic transformation. But it was a beginning. That first week felt painful. The mind constantly wanted comfort again. The phone called for attention every few minutes. Videos, notifications, endless entertainment, all waiting to pull focus away. Many times, the person almost gave up. Some mornings felt empty and slow. Exercise hurt. Reading felt difficult. Focus disappeared quickly. There were moments of frustration where progress seemed invisible. But something important changed. For the first time, the person stopped chasing motivation. Instead, small routines were repeated no matter how emotions felt. Wake up. Make the bed. Drink water. Go outside. Move the body. Work quietly. Read a few pages. Sleep earlier. Simple things. Small things. But repeated every day. Weeks passed slowly. Then months. The apartment slowly became cleaner and brighter. Morning sunlight started filling the room instead of pale blue phone light at midnight. Coffee cups disappeared from the desk. The notebook pages were no longer empty. Outside, winter rain slowly turned into warmer spring evenings. And inside, something invisible was rebuilding. Confidence. Not loud confidence. Quiet confidence. The kind created when somebody finally keeps promises to themselves. The body became healthier little by little. The tired eyes slowly looked calmer. The shoulders straightened naturally. Work improved. Focus lasted longer. But the biggest change was deeper than appearance. The constant guilt disappeared. That heavy feeling inside the chest began fading. One evening, nearly 6 months later, the person stood beside the same window where hopeless nights were once spent scrolling endlessly. The city lights still glowed outside. Rain still touched the glass softly. But the apartment felt completely different now. Peaceful. Clean. Alive. The phone sat silently on the desk, no longer controlling every hour of the day. The person looked at the reflection in the dark window again. This time, the face looked familiar. Not perfect. Not rich. Not famous. But finally, present. Finally awake. Tears filled the eyes quietly, because the truth became impossible to ignore. 6 months earlier, this life was falling apart silently. And nobody outside would have noticed. But 6 months of focus had changed everything. Not because life suddenly became easy. Because discipline slowly rebuilt a broken mind one ordinary day at a time. The person smiled softly and closed the notebook. Outside, the rain finally stopped. And for the first time in years, the future no longer felt frightening. It felt open. If this story touched something inside you, maybe this is your sign that small daily choices can still change your entire direction. Sometimes the biggest transformation begins in the quietest moment, when a tired person finally decides they no longer want to waste their life.